I was given a copy of an earlier edition of this book by somebody who, upon witnessing coordination, position, and movement issues due to physical disability, presumed that I was in a lack of knowledge about the teachings. Now, I was more pleased with Sheikh Adly's book on the subject than others that I had encountered. And I still think it is the best little book on the subject that I have encountered. And I gave away that copy and other editions. I think I've given away one of this edition before. And the references that I had memorized are that I remembered the gist of. This book contains the like of that. Now, if you read the bigger collections, you get more varieties of what can be said in certain postures or for certain occasions. But even though we don't have the listing of all the books that these things are from and the number of where they are in those books, this book still seems completely sound. Now, I don't remember if there's any difference as far as jurisprudence in regards to any of the issues brought therein. There are narrations that don't tell the whole story, and some schools of thought have based their idea on that, oh, well, it doesn't say that you fold the arms here in this one narration, but, if we're not looking at the Quran, in pretty much all issues, we, hold back on making our decisions until we figure out, okay, what happened before and after in the chapter and otherwise to tell us the complete saying of what was going on, right? And one of the things about prayer from a revelation standpoint is that prayers to be done like the exemplar prophet that one believes in. And Surah 5:6 addresses the ablutions because, that's where we start, the Wudu. And to simplify it, if there's not the right amount of water or there's some sort of condition that washing that once more could be considered harmful, then or you have some medical condition, you just wash up for one per time, and then for the other one, you tap the earth and wipe over your hands and face. So you don't have to go to extremes of rubbing sand on your face and all that. Now, if you have the water to do the whole ablution, your hands to the elbows, your face and over your head and over each of your feet. And, if you look at the narrations to make it totally clear to people, you want to be able to feel water on your chin or on the top of your head and between your fingers and between your toes. Now, it's good to brush your teeth. And by brushing your teeth, I mean with the toothstick. Certainly there's occasions where you wouldn't want toothpaste. because you might accidentally swallow the toothpaste, or some might be swallowed anyways. So when you're fasting, you don't, and you be careful of the rinsing out of your mouth and nose when you're fasting. But then again, in general, you don't have to do that. Now that's obliged. If you need a full bath, and then it's your whole body, and things are done from the right to the left, when there's a difference, you know what I mean. When you have to break things up, you wash the right hand and the left hand, and the right foot, the left foot. Ablutions, whether ghusl or wudu, ghusl is a full bath. There's sort of a symbolic repentance, and one of the things that you should be doing when you pray is to address the repentance. And everything worth doing, there is a before, during, and after sort of remembrance. And of course, when washing up, one thing that needs to be mentioned that a lot of people they play games with it. It's like, well, if you don't know, ask. Don't just assume. But when you wash up, you're supposed to try to, take care of, that you don't get stuff on you as much as you can when you go to the bathroom, and you clean up as best as you can, and then you head out. That doesn't mean you get out a scouring pad and all that, but you at least rinse off and wipe off and all that sort of stuff. But you don't just dab off. You use water if it's available, and that's again the best. If it's not available, okay. And when you finish your ablutions, you testify that there's no God but Allah. And when I say the singular and definitive God, that's what I mean. I'm using the word used in John 3:16, which, you think they would get it, right? When it's right in the verse. It's when you're trying to, but, people don't get it. And in other languages too. Jesus says, don't worship me, only worship the one good Lord. Again, the Christians don't get it. So, you can't expect, even if it's right there, for people to get it. I mean, you can hope. But we testify to that, and that Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, not the writer of this book, is God's servant and messenger. And of course, this is the direction that we face in our prayer in this age. Now, as far as the positions, it's most sound for all the Allahu Akbars when you're standing to raise your hands in the modified praise position as indicated. So, if you have a one bow prayer, you make that, then you fold your arms over your chest, right over left, and then you make the modified praise position again. Then you bow, if you can, make it sort of a right angle, but you put your hands on your knees to stabilize yourself. And in all the prayer positions, except, when you're sitting, you have your feet shoulder length apart. You don't want to have to move back and forth when you pray. And then after the bow, you make that modified praising position again, and then you go into prostration, where your forehead and your nose are lined up with your hands. So those 3 points, and then your knees, and then your toes, and people will have there are people who will sit with the feet together and, the left foot kind of under the right foot for the final sitting more than anything else. But they'll sit on their feet basically, in between the prostrations. And then if the prayer is, if it's the last or an even number of the prayer set, you make this pointing gesture by you put your fingers together with your thumb and then you point with your index finger. And then you'll call that back like you do in between the sittings. And then you turn to your right shoulder and then to your left shoulder. And that's a 1 bow set. So to go over that again, with a 2 bow set, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4. One, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 6, 7. And so one just adds on accordingly. And if you have a 3 bow prayer, we have 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 6, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 6, 7. And if it's 4, 1, 2, 1, 4, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 6, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 4, 6, 7. Now, I'm generally going to leave off the specific variations of the prayer in this program, but one of the things that we need to remember is the appropriate clothing for attending to the prayer, whether one's alone or not. And some people will have better clothes to pray by themselves than they will in public. But if you can help it, you should have better clothes than your physical labor outfits when you come to the prayer. And it's not just if you work with the animals either. But if you're a business person and you go everywhere else with your suits and all that stuff, why not go to the masjid in better attire, right? But don't make a point to show off, regardless. This is not the thing. Sometimes there will be accidents at the place of worship, whether it's communal or otherwise, or there will be ignorance. And, pouring water over the messes will suffice if that is what can be done. Nowadays, they may be able to get out a carpet shampoo or something like that. An inanimate object about a foot high or just a foot across, some will say, or something like that, something significant, like something big enough that you could sit on, should be in front of the person that leads the prayer. And this can be a wall or something like that too. But it marks off the space so people know don't walk in front. Now, if they do, that's theirs, but you kind of, you resist them. That's not really discussed here, I don't think. You say God is greater than, you make glorification, you seek refuge with God from Satan, and you recite the first chapter of the Quran, which all this can be said silent if you're doing the voluntary or recommended prayers on your own, or there's a dangerous circumstance or something, and you say something further from Al-Quran. And this is what you do in the first bow set, and in the second of any prayer set that you're doing, except for the opening part in between the takbir, the Allahu Akbar part, and the starting the recitation. And if it's an odd-numbered middle of the night prayer, then whichever standing portions you say that. If it's an eclipse prayer or funeral prayer, again, you have portions. But a funeral prayer, you only say the Fatiha, and then there's other supplications. Now, there are supplications from the Quran that people will use, but I don't think that the Shaykh gets into those as far as use in the funeral prayer. When you get up from the bowing, you declare that God hears those that are praising him. And you fold your arms and say that that our Lord hears all the praise. Now, Lord with an uppercase L, right? We're not using all these different terms that confuse people in the Bible. In the Arabic, we're very clear with our Rabbana. When we bow, we glorify God as Almighty. And when we prostrate, we glorify God as the most exalted. And there are some variations to what can be said in those portions, but that basic form, I think, really should be what people learn, is the Subhana Rabbi duas. Between the prostrations, position 5, you ask the Lord, cherisher, sustainer of existence, to forgive. And when you make the 6th position, the pointing, you enact that part from the vision where the prophet learned the details of the prayer and of this age. And you testify that everything good is for God. And the benedictions are upon the prophet and all the righteous believers. And then, particularly if it's the last bow, as they're called, the ruku is how you divide the prayer. 1, 2, 3, 4, some odd number above that in some of the voluntary prayers. You will continue with supplications, particularly the seeking refuge with the four things, but it's best to start with the benedictions upon Muhammad and Abraham, affirming their influence. Hell, grave, life and death, the false Messiah are things that form standard supplications of refuge towards the end of the prayer. People will ask for the good of this life and the hereafter. And as far as one of those four things being what they're going to call the Antichrist, which is a more narrow term than Messiah Dajjal, well, that can be talked about more elsewhere, can it? And did I mention that during the pointing portion you do testify to the faith? So you repeat your Shahada? To clothes the Tashahhud. Now, why would somebody need a full bath? Well, is it Friday? Is it one of the two holidays? You know, for the holiday prayer on the morning of the 1st of the 10th month, or the 10th of the 12th month? Has one menstruated? Has one finished one's post-childbirth? Has one had any sex act? Has one had the sexual emission with the white? The clear only requires the rinsing it off, or, you know, that sort of thing, if it is not part of, you know, a sex act. And did I mention the involuntary emission, whether by day or night, if nothing's going on, or one just slept and it happened when one slept? Then now, for how many raka'ah are in each prayer? For the dawn prayer, we got 2. For the early afternoon, we have 4. Late afternoon, 4. Evening, 3. Dusk, 4. Now, I don't see the list here, but so for the evening prayer, the recommended are 2 after. For the dusk prayer, 2 after. For the dawn prayer, 2 before. Some people make a voluntary morning prayer after the sun has risen clearly above the horizon, or some equivalent to that. 4 before for the early afternoon prayer, and 2 after. And as far as the late afternoon prayer, just like the dawn prayer, there's nothing after, unless there is a separate cause of making these supplications. Women will cover more of their body than men as far as what is required. And biologists will tell us that the area where sexual arousal is possible totally explains that. Now, the covering of the hair makes it easier than choke chains. Some cultures, they have that, but I think that's because they realize these are spots that people are going to want to touch, because everybody's going to have a reaction, whether or not they've developed things in their head or not. So it becomes part of modesty or something too, but it's just easier to wrap over the head, and that's it. Now, if you need to, particularly like if there's wind or something, adjust your clothes to, keep them from exposing yourself or something, that's fine. You minimize that stuff. If breathing, or if you're the person reciting, if you need to clear your throat, you can do that. Now, you can straighten the rows. If somebody steps back or something like that, you can step forward. You can pull people over if they don't notice, that sort of thing. There's ethics of how to do that, so one is careful of that. People will cover the mouth during yawning or sneezing. Now, unlike other congregations in Islam, even the women can correct the men during the prayer or even the sermon. So, but not. I'd prefer it if you say this instead. I've heard children yell out that they want this recited or that recited or whatever, but that's not what we're to do. Now, women can indicate by a clap, and men can say subhanallah. But one of the things that you see subhanallah mentioned most with nowadays is that people, they just would prefer a different supplication to be said. And some people get too political. In Islam, our cause is beyond politics, so we don't, there may be some sort of issue, I don't know, like a bug or whatever, where people feel like they have to spit or something. And if it must go down, under the left foot, some will into their garment. But, you don't wear graven images. You don't make a point of being distracting. You know what I mean? People with all this stuff written on their clothes and stuff like this, you should probably, that should be kept down, particularly if it's on the back, so the person behind you's looking at that. A person should only be looking at the place where you prostrate, or you can look to the person who's leading the prayer. And you don't lift your eyes, and your prostration shouldn't be like a dog's. So you don't, your elbows aren't down along with it. And this book here has the last 6 chapters of Al-Quran in Arabic, transliteration and translation. I don't know if he does his own translation. It looks like, well, I mean, the brother can certainly translate Arabic. That's one of the reasons why he's done so many videos, is because he can do his own stuff more smoothly and stuff like that. But now, disabled people or sick people can alter their prayer accordingly. The Friday prayer, you show up before the sermon starts. You get it in the building before that. And if not, then you pray 2 bows and it becomes required. And the odd-numbered prayer, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, or up to 11. There are some prayers that occur in some of the narrations that aren't mentioned here. I've mentioned the funeral. There's no bowing or prostrating. And so it's between 4 raising the hands, Allahu Akbar, that modified praising position. So he gives you say the first chapter of the Quran of the first, and you do the benedictions, and then with the third, you ask for the deceased. And it's important to know, you could do a general one, whether it's a group funeral or whether it's just one person you're doing the funeral for. There will be some with, that will use what's it called? The gender and whether the individual is pre-adolescent or post-onset of adolescence will show up in the supplication. And afterwards, people will ask for the continuance of the reward. So their legacy and an energy that's not so bad, right? To not give the terms. And then there's the guidance prayer, the 2-bow prayer, and the supplication. And so there's a supplication where they pray, but it's what's good for your affair. You're not praying for what you want, just to fulfill your desires. You're praying that it's good for you, actually good for you and your faith. The eclipse prayer, another 2-bow prayer, but you double the bowing and standing. And these are prolonged. And the prostrating is longer than other things. And there's the flipping your clothes inside out, doing a, rain prayer. And yeah, there's a handful of other things that you're going to find in the narrations, and whether the brother considers it sound or not, I'm not sure. It's not really my business to keep so much track. If someone's not personally in my community, I've met him before, but because he does travel. I've never been to Colombia, or at least he used to travel. Got in a car wreck or something, and I'm not sure if he's ever traveled since out of his area. But that I don't watch all his videos, so I can't say. We need to protect our inner prayer. So our humility. I've mentioned elsewhere. There's 33 different things that I found narrated that could enhance the experience of the prayer. And certainly, we want to be smooth with our motions. We want to try our best to get that position, to try to be able to relax and feel that position. That's especially why if someone's disabled, let them decide what they can do and how they can get closer to the position. Because people's all just sit with your legs forward and kind of crouched over, and it's like, yeah, but in some ways you can get closer. So if you can kind of extend a leg a little bit and prostrate and keep facing the right direction and not have your feet facing Qibla and stuff for the rest of the prayer, that should be up to one. And what do you lean forward and put your? Yeah, it should be up to the person, because you want the experience of the prayer, and if they figure out how to get closer or what they consider closer, it's their conscience that they have to deal with. So communities shouldn't hold them back. I myself have, hundreds of times saying extra prayers with some communities. Not that many. More problems with one particular community than others. But it's not the religion here that we're. It's issues with the people. Almost all the stuff that you're going to run into is issues with the people. But we want to work on the inner side of our prayer as much as anything else, and don't let anybody pull this garbage with you that if they're not trying to keep the form of the law, that they're somehow, full on with the law, right? And so there's question of how to straighten up the rows, but obviously the shoulders are, meant to line up, and the ankles are meant to line up, and that brings us closer. Now, people will do different remembrance after the prayer, and you're like, I just prayed, why do I have to seek forgiveness? It's like, well, it's not forgiveness but then again, what if you made a mistake? That's why you say extra, why it's good to say extra. That's why it's there's different remembrances that can be said not just after the prayer, but it's good to let things permeate, right? There's certain parts of the Quran, there's prostration, for forgetfulness. If you find out after the prayer, then you make a second set of taslim after making these prostrations. If not, you don't have to break the prayer, and instead of closing the prayer with the peaceful greetings to each side, you will, because you don't say peace be upon God, so, you say it to those around, are those that may be present, whether you know of them present or not, right? And so, yeah, you just bow. You prostrate twice with the sitting in between, and that's, sufficient. But if you have your doubts, you will add until you're sure that you finish the prayer, and then make the prostrations. And if you do all your prayers, one's, guaranteed. It's the best way to keep yourself from being tormented in your grave, is that you fulfilled your prayer obligations. And if you fulfill your prayer obligations, the other things in life will follow.